Welcome back to the Built for Profit podcast, guys. I am so excited today. Mr. Tim Willis, we're doing this in person
Oh man,
at the Summit headquarters,
world headquarters.
located in Marietta, Georgia.
That's right.
First off, let me just give a little intro to Tim because I just love him so much. He is my wife's cousin. So I've gotten to know you a good bit over the past 10 years since we've been married. Coincidentally, you've also are celebrating finishing your 10th year in business, which
Actually, it's 11th. We're finishing our 11th year.
oh,
How
shoot,
about that? We
let's go.
cracked that last year.
Yeah, love that so much, Tim. And so I just have to brag on Tim for a second because I feel like he's one of the most genuine people I've ever met. I feel like he genuinely cares for each of his team members and wants what's best for them, not just focused on how do I make money as a business owner, how do we grow into the future, but he genuinely wants not just what's best for his team members. But I just feel like you have a servant's heart, man. It's just fun to see that. You and I talk a good bit,
Sure.
just getting back on forth on talking about business and life. And I just very much crave those conversations every time we get together. So I am fired up to have this conversation with you because it's going to be a lot of fun to hear the story of Summit. Obviously going on 11 years now, which is awesome. So Tim, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. This is fun.
And if you want to kick us off, man, kick us off by just saying who is Tim Willis and kind of give us family life and then maybe background before Summit and what that looked like.
Gosh, man, I have, just to kind of get started, I have a family of 5 total. I have 3 teenagers. We had kids really young. And so we got married in our 22, 23. Sorry, Jen, somewhere in there. But I am in my almost mid 40s, and I have almost a 17-year-old, an 18-year-old, and a 19-year-old, and one's at college. And I feel like they have a whole life ahead of them, and with how old or young we are, I have a whole life ahead of me as well. Grew up here in Georgia. Really, my whole life I've been here, and I don't know. I don't know where to jump
so
in.
take us back a little bit. College, you met your wife in college.
Yeah.
And then what was life looking like shortly after college? And then tell us a little bit about, I guess, how did you know that you were going to own your own business one day, or
No.
what did that look like?
So I always make the joke of I still don't know what I want to do when I grow up all the time. I talk to our kids about what they want to do. And, I always follow up with that joke. I think when I went to college, there's even a whole story behind this. We can go on for hours, which I don't want to, but, when I went off to college, that the summer before, right before college, my father was he'd call me Timmy, and he goes, "Timmy, do you want to are you going to college, son?" Which is baffling to me because we've taken our kids on college tours and all the stuff, and we've been thought about their sophomore and junior years and applied to a million places, and here we are. Love my folks, but I literally had graduated high school, and my dad came to me. He's like, "Are you going to college?" And so I was like, I think I'd like to, is what I told him. And it was, we were almost to the fall at this point, and it was either go get a job or go to college somewhere. And he's like, "You should maybe go to North Georgia College." At this point, if you do their little military program that they have there, which is not a little military program, it's a huge military program, then maybe you can get accepted and go to college. So we went up there and toured it. And so that's about how much thought about what my next step in life was going to be. So if you were to ask that same kid, what he wanted to do when he grew up, there question marks beyond question marks. And so it took a really long time and a lot of thought and a lot of jobs that I hated or I was really bad at before I kind of ended up where we are now. And so that's, there's a lot of stories behind that, but it definitely, it wasn't a dream to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
So,
well, okay. Give us one sneak peek into one of those jobs where you were just I know I'm not supposed to be here. This is not my skill set.
Yeah.
Dive into that a little bit.
Okay. Fair enough. So I would say in a period of time, maybe 5 years, maybe even 6 years. I probably had about 9 jobs, I think, and they were one worse than the next because I would basically be like, "This isn't working out," and go to the next one and the next one. And the there were some interesting jobs in there, but the worst one was probably the last one because I and it was the one that actually pushed me into changing careers because I and let me roundabout answer your question. I When I graduated college, I got a degree in criminal justice, which is so helpful in running a heating and air company. And so when I finished college, we went and did 2 years of college ministry with campus outreach at UGA, and that was cool. But it was kind of like graduate school, in that like
Okay.
you could do it, and it was a great experience. Loved it, and it really shaped a lot of my life and the trajectory for sure. But it was still like an ability to be like okay with not knowing with what you wanted to do when you got older. And so every job that I had was each job I felt like was me learning not who I was, but who I wasn't.
Yeah.
And so by process of elimination, I recognized, man, I'm really bad at this. Can't do this.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
went to the next one. I'm like, I can't do this. This isn't working out. And there were some successes. I wouldn't say that I was a dismal failure in all of those jobs, but I certainly never got any traction. And the last job, though, I one of the things I've learned about myself is one is that I interview really well at jobs, especially
yeah.
jobs that I shouldn't get. I could put on a good face, I can look the part, I could talk the part, and so people would be like, "Oh, this guy's great. He'd be a great fit." And this job was doing IT recruiting,
Okay.
so I was a recruiter for this IT company, and I guess AI would make it a much better job because it would just go through all of these spreadsheets for you. But my job was literally to sit in this cubicle and look at these resumes manually, reading through resumes and matching them up to these job profiles, and then like coming up with, you know, I would call these candidates and saying, "Hey, I think I found a job for you. Were you interested in it?"
Yeah.
And I would sit in a cubicle for hours and hours and hours, and it was the most soul-sucking job for me.
Yeah.
Turns out I hate details, and I knew that. When I went into that job, the snippet is that I remember distinctly asking the cliche interview question, what's one of your weaknesses? And I told them, I go, "Well, my answer to that was I'm really bad at or I know I'm not great at details. Like it's just not like I'm naturally oriented towards that, but I'm so aware of it that I've really structured myself to, be able to overcome that and to where
Perfect answer.
that was my answer." And they're like, "Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Sure." And so I got the job and like when they should have said no to that because I literally just remember sitting in that office every single day and I would get up after 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes, and I'd go make Earl Grey tea with honey in it. And then I'd go like take like 10 minutes making my tea. Then I go sit back down and get motivated. And I'd spend like 5 more minutes of the spreadsheet. And then and I'm like, I can't. And then I go to the bathroom. So I got a call from my boss. And finally, and this was the last straw. It was that after all these jobs, that job, like my boss calls me after maybe 3 months. It wasn't a long
Okay.
time,
Yeah.
but he calls me and he's like, this isn't working out, is it? I go, no, no, it's not working out, not great. And so he's like, yeah, you should not work here anymore. So he literally fired me over the phone, which I think is probably worse than, I mean, that's worse than even getting broken up by text. Like I almost wish he would have just texted me to say you can't work here. So
So, I mean, but the moment you felt in that moment, I'm sure was like relief probably more than anything. You're just like, I know I'm not supposed to be here, but I'm sure it's rejection some, but then
it was both, right? It was
yeah,
relief and like, I mean, like I got home, like I cried, like I
yeah,
was just really upset and like because I relief in that like I knew that I didn't have to go to that job anymore,
yeah,
but like mortifying fear that like, what am I supposed to do? At
yeah,
that
yeah.
point, I had a wife, I had 2 kids at that point,
Oh,
and
wow,
a
yeah.
dog that is, lived forever. It's a whole other story. And so like that was like crazy. But I just remember my dad finally saying, like, maybe you do something else that doesn't require you wearing a suit and you
Yeah,
using your criminal justice degree to get your foot in the door with these corporate white collar jobs. Maybe you learn a trade.
yeah,
That's what, you know, and that was the end of I think I was probably 20 in my late 20s at that point. And so I just had been through all these jobs, and like, and they were all the other jobs previous were just pivots of just
Yeah.
like by a couple degrees, maybe this flavor of this kind of sales job or this, but like I had never been like going this way and then realizing this isn't working and make a full trajectory shift because
Yeah,
it's hard
yeah.
to do that with a family and a mortgage and
Okay.
bills and all the stuff. You're
Yeah.
just, so that's, I don't know. That's kind of like what pushed me into the direction of at least the industry that I'm in now. So,
So, do you feel like that conversation with your dad was the pivot moment for you to be like,
man,
"Okay, this is
that's
the"
like a therapy question, and I never really thought about it, but maybe that
really?
might, yeah, he did. He's like, I pretty vividly remember it. He
Yeah,
goes to me, he's like, I think maybe I mean, let me paint this picture a little bit farther. Is
yeah.
he goes, like, when I lost that job, we realized we had to do something different. We sold our house.
Oh,
We,
wow.
uh, which, and this may be in reverse order for our podcast here, but the like we sold our house, we sold well, I paid our life savings out to be able to just start over. So, sitting with my dad, he was like, yeah, he sat down, and my dad's an executive chef, and so he worked in a trade his whole life.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so I think that was the heart of where he asked me that question. But you might be right. That might be,
I was just curious.
that's
I
a
mean,
funny,
it
it's a
seemed
great question, actually. And I think that probably was what, yeah, I would probably say that was the point in which I was like, I need this. I can't make just a small little, maybe this flavor. Like that really was probably the point that I was like, yeah, go ahead. Let's do something completely different. And that's what prompted me selling my house, not getting the same type of sales job. So like that's what prompted us to move back in with our parents, which is like brutal. So
yeah, yeah.
I
It
love them, but
yeah, part of the
so
story though, man, but I think there's something beautiful to me about that because maybe I think what's fun to kinda look up just as you're explaining the story is that it possibly gave you the freedom to go pursue that as well, because I know I've gotten trapped up so many times in my life making up for sunk costs in the past. So, like,
yeah,
you obviously got a criminal justice degree and you were, like, pursuing the white collar sales job or whatever,
yeah,
and it just gave you the freedom to be like, "That I don't have to go force myself into this pigeonhole of something that I've done in the past. It's gonna give me the freedom to do kinda anything in the future."
yeah.
So, that's
So
fun. Okay, so obviously you had the conversation with your dad, and then kinda walk us through early days of Summit. So, from that standpoint, did you go straight into being like, "I'm starting a business," or did you go learn the HVAC world from somebody
yeah,
else, or how did you get to that point?
that's funny. Stories among stories,
Yeah.
you need to kind of pick and choose to navigate conversations like this. But I had that conversation with my dad. We, just said like we literally sold everything. Like where our bank account was at like $0 legitimately. But we I enrolled at a tech school and so went back to tech school. And because I had my other degree, all my core classes were taken care of. So it was going to take about a year and some change to get the technical part of a trade school degree or diploma or an associate's, I think. But that was, so it was kind of like a year pivot for me to go to trade school. And while I was there, I went and applied to all these heating and air companies to work and, go to school at the same time. And that was a little phase of our life that we did that. Like I would work during the day, I'd go to school at night, and Jen would bring Little Caesars hot and ready pizzas with our kids at the tech school in the student lounge.
Love that.
We're sitting there and we did that for a year. But in that time, when I started interviewing at other heating and air companies, again, you know, not the best interviewer, but better than all the other people showing up to applying for heating and air jobs. And every single time I showed up, I dressed nice, I shaved, I looked good, and I brought my resume. It was already pre-done. I think there was even a cover letter on it. And I'd go to these heating and air companies, and at that time, like they didn't care about any of those things. I was overdressed. I was, like honestly, they would have rather have hired the guy that, just, you know, showed up who just cut all the mufflers off of his Bronco. And, like that guy was more attractive to doing that job. And they're like, are you, you want to, and I didn't want to do sales again. They're like, do you want
Yeah,
to do a sales position here? And I go, no, I'd like to start at the bottom.
Yeah.
And so they were like, so a lot of them, I put my resume out to like 10 different companies.
Yeah.
And finally one's like, yeah, we'll let you come here. But they were baffled. I was a kind of an enigma to
Yeah.
them, which rightfully so. I don't even know that I would hire a guy coming into our office now looking like that. I would have been like, you're not the right person for this job.
Yeah, and the combo of your resume too, right? Because I'm sure you had all of those different sales
Yeah,
job
yeah.
experiences on there.
So yeah, like I was a good fit on paper for that job, but I was like, you know what? I go, I want to learn a trade, like
Yeah,
legitimately. And so just like, and I want to be able to be an expert at, maybe I do sales someday, but I want to know what I'm selling and be the
yeah,
best at that. And so I got a job making like legitimately, it was like $11 an hour. It's- Essentially, I was just a grunt and
yeah,
just the greenest heating and air guy ever, ripping out ductwork out of crawl spaces at that point and doing whatever these guys that were younger than me, but they've been doing it since they were like 11. Uh, those were my bosses at that time. And so it was a pretty humbling experience, but
yeah,
that was where I jumped into the trades.
yeah, I
So
love it. And I'm curious when you obviously talked conversation with your dad, jumped into trade school, getting the Little Caesars pizza with your family. I just love that. Did you know that that was a stepping stone to start your own business one day, or you were just like, "I'm diving in just to learn, and we'll see what happens"?
No, I still didn't. What I knew was when I switched, I've always, this was, you asked a question about my childhood. The part about my childhood that I didn't tell you about is I love fixing things.
Yeah,
I built forts, like
yeah,
alone in the woods, like behind our house. All like I built so many forts,
yeah,
and I would take all my dad's tools and subsequently my grandfather's tools, and then I would lose them in the woods, and my dad would eventually find out about where did all his tools go, and it was always my fault. But I like it's funny that childhood experience of doing that so many times was kind of a little bit of foreshadowing of like, hey, Tim, you like this. You like tangibly fixing things and working with things and constructing things. And I stole wood from building sites and just, and would drag things in the woods and build ramps and, bridges across creeks and all sorts of stuff.
yeah,
And, and sometimes people were with me and sometimes they weren't. But it's funny, the moment I started doing something again, you know, fast forward almost 20 years later, maybe like 15 years later, uh, all of a sudden I was doing things with my hands again.
yeah,
And I
yeah.
was like, oh, wait a minute. I like this. I'm good at this. And
That's awesome.
I, I tell people that regardless from the entrepreneur piece of, starting a business and whatever, I would say that in my entire professional career, my $11 an hour job I was there was the first job I ever had that I actually got traction in my career.
That's
In that
awesome.
when someone said, hey, you're good at this, and they started to pay me more, and then they started to give
Yeah,
me more responsibilities, and they saw that like I had traction, and I never had traction in my entire career up to this point.
yeah,
And so that kind of informed me to say like, okay, I'm I'm jumping in. I'm like, and so I was all in at that point. And so I very, very quickly progressed technically and wasn't thinking about business. I was just thinking about fixing stuff.
yeah,
And so that was kind of the huge pivot, I guess you can say.
yeah. Love that, Tim, because I think you mentioned it earlier, those 6 jobs in 9 years or whatever the number was, where you were learning what you're not good at, not good at, not good at. Nobody wants to go through that, but in my opinion, it's equally as important of learning what you're good at to also learn what you're not good at.
Yeah,
So, it's process elimination, like you said. And so,
sure.
but it's never fun to go through those things because it's almost like, man, I'm doing this again and I'm not good at it. I'm doing this again. I'm not good at it. But I just think that's the beauty to me about like the sweet spot that you're in now, which we'll get to in a minute, but just of walking through that season or those seasons and knowing like this is not what I should be doing.
Well, that's what whenever I talk to people about their careers and where they are, like it's funny to contrast what like people now want to. I think the culture and where we are in society is people want to love what they do, and they also want to have a life outside of work as well. But they were like, hey, if I'm going to go to work 8 hours a day or 40 hours a week or whatever, people want to love what they do. And I think about my father and I think about my father-in-law. They had the same jobs and they probably liked what they do in certain respects, but they were company men and
Yeah, yeah,
they
yeah.
like were, you know, thick and thin. We're just going to be here and I'm going to get a pension, whether I like it or love it. There's that grit and determination of like, you got a good thing going.
Yeah,
Don't
yeah.
let that go, which that degree of responsibility and ownership of what they were doing is was probably really important. And I think how they felt about it really came secondary
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
to that. And I think that's a big shift in our culture to where now it's kind of like, if I like what I'm doing, then I'm going to work really hard at it, which is, better or worse. That's kind of,
Yeah,
that was me is that like, I was like, if I'm going to work like every day, I have to love it.
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
do. And so,
Yeah. But with the fun thing to me about that is that, at least for me, and maybe I'm just a super slow learner, but like I don't even know what I love until I have the experience to trigger that, right? Or know what I don't love until I have the experience to trigger it.
yeah,
So I've done same thing as you, is that there's been seasons of my life where I was doing something consistently every day that showed me and revealed to me I'm not good at it and I don't enjoy it.
that's right.
And there's a whole book written about like most people fall in love with things that they're naturally good at. I think God wired us that way, right? That
Sure.
like if you and so you just have to experience those things before you understand like, oh, you can't just pick it out of a hat as a 16-year-old to be like, oh man, this is what I know I'm gonna do the rest of my life. Or most people can, I feel like.
Well, yeah, and I think that's most people. And then I also think about, it's so relevant to, all of our kids going to college now. And I'm asking them, you know, what do you want to do? What's your major? And it's almost unfair for me to even ask that question
Yeah.
because like 18-year-old Tim was so clueless and had no idea and had lived no life really at
Yeah.
all. And so you really do have to experience hard things and things that you don't like, I believe, to even learn who you are
Yeah.
and subsequently who you are not.
Yeah.
So
So true, man. Okay. So there's this iconic picture that I've seen on maybe y'all's Instagram or somewhere, but I think it's year one of Summit. And it's the picture of your kids in adult small t-shirts saying Summit HVAC, and they're like looking at maybe the house that was the office at the time or something. It's just such a beautiful picture to me. If I can find it, we're going to flash it up on the little podcast so you can see it.
we can find that one.
But I just think it's so cool. So take us back to 2015 or
Yeah.
the start of Summit, 2014, whatever it was. And like, what did that look like? You had this, the tech school and then apprenticeship. And then, so
So
taking this leap of faith, what did that look like for you and your family?
I love talking to entrepreneurs about how they started their business because I think usually it's a pretty exciting story. The What's funny is, so for about 5 years I worked for other companies. And in that time, somewhere in that I was like, it crossed my mind that to start, maybe I'll do my own thing one day. And I remember those specifically, like I kept talking about traction. I kept getting traction at this job and I ended up at this doing commercial HVAC work for a pretty reputable company. And like same deal. I kept getting traction and that what an exciting thing for me. It was great. And so after a while, went to my boss and I was like, hey, I want to do more. I want to, you know, I want to develop more as a person because eventually you kind of hit a plateau a little bit in that once you're out and I know guys, there's an infinite amount of things to learn and I'm acutely aware of that. And so I didn't know everything, but from my perspective, I was getting all this traction and then all of a sudden I get to the plateau and a look in the horizon and all I saw was just I'm going to show up to work every day now and I'm going to do the same thing
Yeah.
every single day at the place I was at. And I went to him and I go to my boss. I was like, "Hey, I need get what's next? What's next?" And he's like, "Well, he's like, if you keep at it and you work really hard, you can. I got a management job that's coming up in I think he said a couple of years." And I was like, "No, like, there's no way." And so and that was another turning point for me for to say is like, okay, I'm not changing jobs again, but I need something that now gives me runway. And at
Yeah.
that point, was thinking that I might want to start my own deal.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so at that point, it probably took me about a year to get all of to get my state certifications and everything. And I had enough time and trade with my schooling that I had. It gave me enough for me to be able to get approved by the state board to say, hey, you can get your warm air HVAC license essentially. So in the background, we started to talk. My wife has been so gracious to me and to give me the grace to figure out for 10 years who is Tim Willis. I really think like a lot of people marriages would have crumbled and collapsed underneath the weight of that. Cause like she certainly did not. I mean, there's, again, all the stories that you don't want to talk about, but I mean, at some point she was cleaning houses and and then delivering hot and ready pizzas, that
Yeah.
whole deal, and even while I'm doing heating and air, still wasn't making very much. And so like she was raising our kids and cleaning houses and I was doing, heating and air at these places just to try to make our world financially work.
Yeah.
And we I'm totally lost my train of thought with
No, you're
the
good.
we but either way, she's been really gracious with that's where I was going with it. She was really gracious about, let's start a business. Sure,
Yeah.
why not? We've done everything else, so let's do this. And so
Which
we
speaks a ton to her character, by the way. I just love that so much. Like you mentioned, I mean, she's been with you through all the ins and outs and all the stuff. And like you just said, all the things that you may or may not foreseen doing, marriage with kids and all the stuff.
yeah,
But she's just a Tim supporter through and through, baby. I love
she
it.
has been. And so so in that time I bartered with one of my buddies who does a lot of graphic design. So he did a website, did our branding. I bought a used truck for $4,500
Let's
from
go.
a good mentor of mine who oddly enough, I still buy all of his used trucks from him.
He knew what he was doing.
He knew exactly what he was doing, but he sold me this truck for very cheap. And so we wrapped it, we got everything set up. And what we did not do was the same guy that sold me this truck, his name is Jim, and has had a huge impact on the trajectory and just the fact that I'm sitting here today with you guys. But he was like, I was telling him what we were trying to do, and he's like, look, he's like, you don't want to try to moonlight, and he's like, you just go all in, which was good advice, but it was probably slightly reckless, I would say. But he's like, and he would always, and I quote this, I even said that to you today, but I go, if you chase two chickens, you won't catch either. And so that was the whole thing is that like, and I think that's very accurate.
Yeah.
And so he's like, he's like, just sell out, just do it. And so we created this little Facebook post. Jen did is we got everything set up and we wrote a little blog or a Facebook post about burning the boats.
Love it.
And so
Yeah, burn the ships. Yeah.
burn the ships. Hernando Cortez, is, to keep his people from retreating, burns all the boats of all of his men. So they have to, you know, cause genocide to an entire group of Indians. It's really actually an awful premise, but he left them with no option, right? And so, but we started this hashtag burn the boats post, and I put my 2 week notice in at my company and still didn't have any customers yet. But I had my truck, it was stocked, it was ready, I had a license, I had even created the little carbon copy things you can do invoices on.
Oh
So we
yeah.
were all set. And so I put my 2 week notice in, and at the end of the 2 weeks on Friday, so my last day on Friday, we put a Facebook blast out there that says Summit Heating and Air is open for business. And that's all that it was. It was just a post. We probably private message some people saying, "Hey, we're doing this,"
Yeah.
and we waited, and it really was that dramatic. Like it was just I'm working at my old company, and my last day ended, and now we're literally waiting for our phone to ring.
Yeah.
And I wish I remembered, and I should have written it down, but like we waited for the first phone call to
Yeah.
ring, and I think on that Monday I got a call that's saying, "Hey, I heard you're starting a heating and air company. Can you come out?" And I go, "Sure."
Did
And
they know you previously? This was like, do you
so
remember?
so Jen has a no, I can't. I just remember maybe more how I felt, but I wish I remembered the specific calls. But Jen has a big network of people in the area that we live, and so she like I think a lot of those people drew from they would follow her, and so she kind of created a ready-made platform of like all of her supporters were like, yeah, we'll use Tim, and so at least gave
Yeah.
me the option to either hurt her relationships or maybe, you know, they liked her enough to give me a shot,
Yeah, that's great.
essentially, to get out there and me to do a good enough job. And so I did. Like, people liked me enough, and I fixed some air conditioning systems, and people started to refer me, and the phone just started to continually ring. And I like, it was super bootstraps. We didn't have any debt to start the business. I
Yeah,
didn't
it's
take
big.
any venture capital or anything like it. Yeah, I don't even know what I would have done with the money had they given me money to
Maybe you bought a $5,500 truck versus
maybe a 55. We still have that truck, by the way.
That's
So it's, we
awesome.
call it our OG truck,
Yes, keep
and
it
it's,
forever, man.
yeah, it's, I, maybe we
I think
will.
you should. It
So,
becomes a statue one day in the front office.
but what's funny is our first year in business, and I think one of my favorite parts about it was that what I was making at my old job, at my old heating and air, my last heating and air job, my first year in heating and air of my own business, I made about the same exact amount of money. So I never actually went, like, some people talk about businesses when they start, you're not profitable until like
Yeah,
year
yeah,
2 or 3 or 5 or whatever. But in year 1, just running a little business, like, I supported my family the same, income level. And I always thought that was really cool.
yeah.
And then the
That's
next year I was like, hey, and I think the next year I did, probably like 20% more,
yeah,
25% more. And it just kept going. And that was kind of the start of Summit. So we definitely burned the boats, and we definitely went all in, and it was highly reckless. And I tell our kids now, I tell them, taken in context, but I say, if you say yes, you get good stories.
yeah. That's right. In good context. That's right.
In the right context, because they've asked clarity statements about
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
But I say, if you say yes, you get good stories. And Jen has gracefully said yes most of our marriage,
yeah,
in a lot of the endeavors that we've done, and it's created a lot of good stories so
yeah.
far. So
I think it's
that's,
so powerful. Okay, you have to take us back. That quit on Friday, wait Saturday and Sunday, get a phone call on Monday from this Facebook post. I'm so curious, like, you said you talked about the emotions that you were feeling. What were you feeling? Were you just like crying almost that this actually worked? Or take us back to that feeling that you got getting that phone call.
I mean, I just it was funny. I don't know, man. It was a tough, like, thing, because you were like, you just didn't know. And
Yeah,
so, the fact that it rang, and the fact that you would go out there, you're just like, okay, this is your shot, right?
yeah,
And it really was. It was our, like, I really could have bombed in that scenario. And so, from a, I really wish I remembered more specifically about, like, that specific thing. But I will, I will twist it a little bit. Is, before we started, I thought it was funny is that I declined to do side work for a long
oh,
time.
wow, okay.
People, any heating and air guy that's just doing service calls is inevitably going to get asked by homeowners and friends to say, "Hey, I know you work with your company, but you want to do some side work for me?" And you can say yes to that and make a little bit extra dollars or whatever. And I remember us adding up how many times I said no. I don't want to do any side work, because it
Yeah,
was really hard, because you'd go work 10 or 12 hours in a day,
yeah,
and then you're like, someone's like, "Hey, do you want to go do some more heating and air work on the side?" And you're exhausted. And so
yeah,
most of the time, I'm like, actually, no,
yeah,
don't. But I remember very specifically, I did the math. Is I figured out what an average service call would be,
okay,
and then I figured out what an average install would be. And most residential HVAC companies, you would, like, 75% of your revenue comes from, like, the larger sales of doing, like, a replacement.
okay,
So if you can get a couple of those a month,
yeah,
and then you can do a couple service calls a month, or a certain amount, and it equated to basically be the equivalent of like a part-time job. And so in my mind, I really did, like, I call it pocket math. I was like, I kind of figured, like, what my cost would be. And I figured, I think that with a little bit of Facebook posts and a little bit of what already people are calling me, we could probably make this go. So
yeah, yeah,
in my mind, I kind of think I probably was thinking, like, all right, there's one service call down,
yeah, yeah,
one more down. And so, and it was, and that's what I was thinking over the first month or so is, did I get enough calls? And my pocket math works.
yeah.
It
I
was like,
love it.
I was kind of like, it was close enough. And so that was, I think it was kind of like, okay, check, here's one,
Yeah,
need
yeah.
another one.
Yeah.
So
Okay. So I love stuff like this. It's so fun to hear the story because I'm curious, like going back to year one, year two, those first few years of Summit, what do you feel like the scrappiest thing you were doing? I'm just like, for some reason, I like picture you like driving in your $4,500 truck, the phone rings, you answer, and you're like, this is the office of Tim Willis.
100%.
I'm gonna direct your call. You know, it's just you and a cell phone.
That's
You
right.
got no other employees. But like, talk a little bit about the scrappiness, I guess, of those first few years.
So, gosh, so there's funny things in there. One is I had business cards made and I very quickly took off. I The ones I had, it said Tim Willis and then it had owner,
Oh yeah, yeah.
and I very quickly got rid of those
Okay.
and I took owner off. Because if you are a big heating and air company, the owner doesn't come out
Got
to
it.
fix your HVAC.
I was like, "Where are you going with that?"
Yeah, yeah. And so that was like it was like a little bit of an adjustment for me of how we present is that I didn't want to present as this mom and pops, like, bootstrap
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
company, even though that was kind of a selling point for me for a while. But I wanted to come across as professional.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so that was just a funny little adjustment that was like, once I was done with those,
I love that.
the one thing I learned, and it's funny, once you start a business, you get to where you're the chief everything
Yeah,
officer
yeah, yeah.
at that point. And I remember very specifically, driving down the road, answering the phone, Summit Heating and Air, and I'm literally driving with my knee, writing on a yellow legal pad this person's information down while I'm, eating lunch. And that's what I was doing. Jen was not like, she would be she was the reason why our phone rang.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
like
yeah.
I was answering the phone, and then to answer your question specifically, the scrappy piece of it is I distinctly remember trying to do the books,
Oh, yeah.
and I have the most vivid memory of us sitting in of it was at night. Jen and I were like watching the show, and I had a month's worth of invoices, and I knew nothing about bookkeeping, like zero. And I just remember like I read a book of by Ellen Rohr called "Where Did All the Money Go?"
Okay. I've
And so-
never read that book.
yeah, it was pretty good. Yeah, but I had no idea, and I just remember a stack of all of these invoices from my suppliers, and then all the carbon copies of the invoices that I had created, and then I was literally just trying to enter stuff into QuickBooks, and I didn't know what my chart of accounts
Oh,
were
yeah.
and the general ledger and all the stuff goes. And I was so overwhelmed. And my bookkeeping for year 1 and 2 and 3 was so bad. It was lost. It was lost to like, did I really make that as much as I thought? No,
Yeah.
probably not. But it was so bad. And I felt so overwhelmed about that, recognizing I'm like, okay, well, if I'm going to run a business, then
Yeah.
I need to make an adjustment here on some administrative pieces.
Yeah, I
And
love
so,
so that was gonna be my next question. I love this because so you're year 2, year 3 in the business. I'm curious, and you and I have both read Buy Back Your Time and the concept behind just, like, getting the owner in the sweet spot and really everybody on the team in their sweet spot. I'm curious, like, what did the team look like in those first few years? What were your first few hires? And then what was the key hire that you felt like that you were like, "Man, this has pulled me out of the craziness that I was living in year 1 to, like, get to a place of, like, more ownership, less
okay.
operation type thing."
So it's interesting. It's not any one hire.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point.
I think that each hire you make initially, like, there's really not like what I don't think is that like every business owner, whenever they start one, and from conversations and listening to how I built this, and everyone's building a business, and there's some fundamental truths that are
Yeah, yeah,
true of like, you can, you need to hire out, your weaknesses and surround yourself with people that are good at things and they're better at those things than you are. And
yeah.
but I remember I hired I hired a CPA initially. It turns out not all CPAs are the same, or nor are they good. Most of them suck. So if you're a good one,
That's true.
bless you. Uh, but I thought that's all I needed.
Yeah.
And from a bookkeeping side, I didn't even really know what a bookkeeper
Yeah,
was.
exactly.
But I remember there was a a lady. Her name was Lori, and she was a contractor book like
Oh, cool. Yeah, yeah,
contracting bookkeeping person.
yeah.
And I used her for so many years. And but like that first piece, I was like, oh, she was like, she'd ask me for receipts, and I don't even know what she did with them.
Yeah.
But like, she, she would take
Just
it.
throw
That's what I
'em.
was throwing in a box, and I would take pictures of them, and maybe send them to her, and maybe I wouldn't. And then she'd send me this huge list of ones that I didn't send to her that she saw. But she was doing these things that I didn't know much about,
Yeah,
and it was. But that one person, it was for better or for worse. Like that was the first person that I hired that was like, okay, I handed something off.
yeah, yeah,
It
yeah.
was just that one thing was the first time I ever handed something off.
And that was your very first hire?
Yeah, if you're counting a contractor, then yes. Then
Yeah,
the
somebody that's doing something for
and then my next hire was I could fix stuff. I could do service calls and like repairs that you would do out of a service truck.
yeah,
But then sometimes these repairs lead to, hey, due to the cost of the repair and how old the system is, you need to replace it. And they're like, well, do you replace it? And I go, sure do. That's like a whole thing. Like that's like, like you need help. This is, heavy stuff. You're ripping
yeah.
stuff out and whatever. And so at that point I hired some contractors to do work
Oh,
with me. Like so
interesting.
they'd come out and so
Just
I
on, like, a per job basis?
yeah, yeah. So I'd pay them
Interesting,
X
cool.
dollars to do these bigger jobs,
Yeah,
and they'd come in, pretty well, and I'd come out better than they did. And so those were my initial hires.
yeah.
And then
I think there's wisdom behind it. That to me goes back to the scrappiness of early on and the burn the boats mentality because it's like, you were still figuring this out, and I think so many people will immediately hire full W-2 employee, like, right off the get-go to try to get them to do something, but I love the scrappiness behind, like, "Okay, I'm gonna, like, be as lean as I can," mentality
yeah,
of phases because you gotta put food on the table, right?
that's right.
But I just love that concept behind it.
Yeah, I do think that that's like a blessing and it is a curse too, because at some point I'm the person that like wants to be predisposed to being scrappy. And I think out of necessity, I think that was
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
cultivated.
Yeah, yeah,
And then at some point, like if you're going to grow beyond that, you still need to be scrappy in some regards, but
yeah.
at some point you have to start paying for professional things and professional people. And that has to be like a change inside of you.
Yeah,
And it's still something that I'm like, there's things at my house that I'm like, I'm not paying someone else to do that.
yeah.
So I'm doing stuff that I'm like, I probably shouldn't have done that. Like that was probably a pretty big waste.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No,
Uh,
I love it. Okay, so a couple years, you kind of talked through the first, hires, and then give us a quick summary of basically years 4 through year 10, and then I would love to kinda move the conversation into what does Summit look like today, and what are you dreaming about into the future? Is there expansion in the future? I just love to kinda talk into that world, but give us the summary of years 4 through 10.
okay. Uh, I think that years 0 through 4 is you building just kind of a base of like, this is who Summit is. This is who
Yeah,
I am. And you're just, does, will people call us? And they do. And then like now all of a sudden you're like, you're busy. So you're hiring a bookkeeper and you're hiring a contractor and maybe you bring on, like there was a couple hires, some initial hires in there. And I will say this before I jump into, and it might have been right at year 4, probably even year 3 is I remember my first hire and it wasn't a part-time guy. I remember that it was almost equally as scary as to when we started the business of me leaving my job and starting Summit was when I said, "Hey, I found a guy that was a I needed a full-time guy that works for Summit."
yeah,
And I just distinctly remember being like, I have to pay for his whole salary. I think I had some benefits in there
yeah,
and I was like so nervous to do it.
yeah,
Like it was one of those just like, oh my God, like, and then like that was scary. And so, we did
yeah,
it. And then fast forward 6 months, I'm like, couldn't, I, I couldn't operate without this person.
yeah, yeah,
And you're like, oh, okay. And then you do it again.
yeah, yeah,
And then you do it again and again. And each time it became a little less scary.
yeah, yeah,
But that first hire, like that full-time hire, because part-time people, they're not entirely reliant on you
yeah, yeah,
to
yeah.
provide
That's a great
contractors.
point.
But that first hire was so scary. And uh,
And you said it was about year 4?
year 1 was just me. Year 2 was probably me and some contractors. Year 3, it's probably year 3, I'd say. I completed 2 full years, and then I was like, I'm gonna, I'm going to hire someone. So
Well, and real quick, how did you even find that person? Like, what did that process look
So
like?
he was actually my neighbor,
Okay.
and I recognized that. Like, so he was a contractor. Like he could build stuff. Like really, he was a tradesman,
Yeah.
and he just didn't like what he was doing. And one of the things I saw though was he had built this fence in front of his house, and most things in nature aren't geometrically perfect.
Yeah.
But this fence that I drove by every day, I was like, it's the most perfect fence I've ever seen. Like I've never seen a more perfect fence. And I looked at it every day, and knowing that like he was looking, and I told him, I go, hey man, you want to, why don't you come work with me? I'll show
That's
you how to
so
do
good,
this.
Tim.
And he translated that geometrically perfect fence into heating and air. And so it's funny, you could see these jobs and you're like, oh, he did that. And so that was kind of fun to see that. But he was my first true 100% hire.
I love stories like that so much, Tim, because, like, that fence was his resume for you.
It
So,
was his
that's
resume.
what's so beautiful to me.
I
It's
hadn't
like,
thought of it like that.
and I think you and I have talked about this previously, but I'm just, like, going so much more into college education. Things on a piece of paper almost don't mean anything to me anymore. It's just, like, character and, like, initiative and, like, self-learning and these things that I'm trying to, like, kind of pull out in the interview process or whenever we're ready to hire the next team member
Yeah.
of just saying like those things are going to take people so much further for something we want to build than any kind of like, and to me, that's just a small glimpse into you got to see him do something that he cared about inside of his own property that you were like, man, if he operates that way this way, then
Yeah,
he'll
that's
definitely
right.
operate.
That was his resume was a
Yeah.
fence. So
So
that's
good.
really funny. But to kind of go to the next 4 years, right? Of like, and where we are now is I read earlier on a book called E-Myth,
Yeah.
and just the idea of building systems and processes that don't require the owner to be the hands and feet to all of those
Yeah. Yeah.
things, that you have processes that allow you to grow beyond yourself.
Yeah.
And I was always aware of that. And I think that is the plight of every business owner, is that if you want to grow beyond yourself, you have to understand that and start working towards that.
Yeah.
And it's almost impossible to do it overnight. I don't
Yeah.
I don't
That's
think that you
very
can,
true.
because some is that your ability to hire those people, maybe you have financial constraints, but then also personally, like you have to like know what you're looking for, or you have to learn how to hire, you have to learn all these things. And that's what my first 4 years was. Hey, you learned how to make a phone ring, and you learned how to fix stuff and get referrals.
Yeah.
And tactically you learned how to do the business.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden, the next 6 years after that have legitimately me been just inching forward of just saying, okay, how can I create a process around this? How can
Yeah.
I? And it really was like starting in that truck. It's funny, I got out of a service van, and I had hired enough people and enough help to where I was able to go down to a pickup truck. I still had my tool bag,
Yeah.
and I had a toolbox in the back.
But you didn't have a full load.
I didn't have a full load, but I had
Yeah.
enough to be able to go look at some jobs and stuff. And I'm still doing service calls and whatever, but
Yeah.
I could, and but that was if you could actually you could actually chronologically look at the development of our business based off of what I'm carrying around in my truck.
Yeah. That's great.
You legitimately
I
can.
love that.
Yeah.
So was that the first moment you felt like you had made a small jump into working on the business and not working in the business?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Was that vehicle switch?
The vehicle would be a point,
Yeah.
very much so, that I'm like, okay, I'm in this truck, and I gave my other guy the van,
Yeah. Yeah.
who is now doing it. So
Yeah.
that is I knew I was supposed to be doing things like that, but that was a physical manifestation
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
me
Yeah.
actually doing it, very much so. And so that's what the next 4 years have been. Was that you? When I started Summit. One of the things that we hadn't really talked about was that, like, I never started reading before. Like in high school, like I would read, Hatchet and book. It's an outside book. I love outside, right? But it wasn't until I started reading books and I mentioned that my mentor Jim, he was invited me to be with these group of guys, and it was like this kind of like a masterminds
Yeah.
group of, and they we kept started reading these books that I've never read before, Jim Rohn
Yeah.
and John Maxwell and all these leadership guys. And I started reading these books, and at the time they were kind of relevant because they were like personal leadership things.
Yeah.
But these last 4 years were like, I had read a lot of books up to that point through this group. And now all of a sudden, these principles and things that I had to start acting on and strategically putting my money where my mouth was. And so I would hire someone and I would buy, you know, maybe we'd move to a new building or something. And it was just this whole process of just like reading these principles, and based off of this principle, it would imply that I have to do X. And that's going to cost you something and it's going to be scary, but you should do it because you can't do the next thing and you can't grow past yourself if you don't do these things. And so for the past whatever amount of years, it's been me constantly getting the nerve to make hard decisions to do the next right thing. And it just, because of those books, a lot of times I know what the next right thing is
Yeah.
because of all these wonderful leaders that have already done this. They're like, "Yep,
Yeah.
this is what's next for you." And I'm like, I don't want to do it yet. So,
Yeah. I think so. The best way I've heard that described is you get 30 plus years of someone's business expense distilled down to into the main summary and principles of their life for 14.95. You know,
that's true.
and it's wild, but books are such a great way to like literally force you to take steps forward. If you like, a lot of people will read them, think about that's great concepts and never apply.
That's right.
That's what I love. You and I talk about this all the time, just with your business, but you're like distilling knowledge from these books to then directly apply as a playbook or principles in your own
Yeah,
business.
that's right.
And it's, but the fact that that is even out there at our grasp in the world is just such a beautiful thing to me.
That's right. And now there's so much out there. Now you're trying to distill like what are you supposed to read because there's so much information, conversation.
So true.
So
So I would love if you remember just off the top of your head, some of the things we talked about recently are entree leadership or
mhm.
the whole Dave Ramsey world. Obviously, you mentioned John Maxwell, Jim Rome, E Myth was a big one. But can you point back to some of the catalyst books, I guess, for Summit that were ones
Yeah.
that you like really challenged you or kind of gave you the vision of what to do for the future?
Yeah. So E-Myth was the first book that I had read that was just it it painted the idea of what an entrepreneur should do and shouldn't do and
Yeah,
how
yeah,
to not be. That book influenced my life in that it was like you don't have to work 80 hours a week,
yeah,
nor should you, like like forever. It shows you that you can do something that's not just everyone's like you start a business and you're not gonna have any free time because you're gonna you have to do everything. And
yeah,
I was like, I refuse to do that. So
yeah,
that book kind of gave you a little bit of a path how to do it. And so I reference that book probably more than I've read it like 4 times,
yeah.
maybe five. The another book, he wrote two books that I really like, but one more than the other is The Compound Effect
Oh
by
yeah,
Darren Hardy. Of that book of just the small good habits compounded over time make massive results.
yeah, yeah. It's
And
good.
I love that idea. And then he probably introduced the idea of just I know he borrowed it, but just the idea of 1% improvements,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
and if you can just do that, and I love that. That's palatable, right? That's
yeah,
like
yeah,
next right step. I'm like, okay, well, I know I shouldn't do this. I should do this, and
yeah, yeah.
and and I keep doing this.
Yeah, it makes it
So,
achievable. Yeah,
and then he also wrote another book called Entrepreneur Roller Coaster.
which you gave me as a gift.
Yeah.
Fantastic book. Yeah.
Uh, and then Extreme Ownership that became one
Oh
of
yeah,
our Jocko. Oh, is it Wilkins? Jocko
I think so.
Wilkins?
Yeah.
Yeah. I really like that book of just that really tugged on my heartstrings of just being extreme ownership. That became one of our values as a business. It's just,
Yeah.
you know, run it like you own it. And so I don't know.
That's good, man. I love that. I think, yeah, all those are, I've read all of those as well. High recommendations, I think. I mean, that's the beauty of these books being out there is that there's things that can propel you forward if you just take the knowledge and apply it. I love
Yeah.
that. Okay. So tell me what Summit looks like now. How many team members,
Okay.
locations, all that kind of stuff, just to kind of give background of where you're currently at. And then if you're willing to share, what is what are either goals or what are you dreaming about of like, what does the next 10 years look like for Summit or do you know?
Okay. So with current size, we have 15 people. Of that, I have one part-time person
Okay.
within that. So I got 14 full-time people.
That's remarkable. Yeah.
I have 6 trucks running on the road, maybe 7. Depends when you ask me. Sometimes they'll park a truck and then there's 2 guys in a truck, so
And
it's kind of a
sometimes the OG cranks and sometimes it doesn't crank.
sometimes the we actually have legitimately on speed dial is our wrecker service. Pretty tight. We will tow vehicles, but it's cheaper than buying new ones. That's for sure. Uh, and so yeah, that's our current size. We are right now. We're in Marietta, Cobb County specifically. So it's north. If you're it's northwest Atlanta, and we I don't know if you know this, but we literally just now have waited to do this. We've waited 10 years to do this, but we feel like we have enough processes and enough systems in place and enough of a foundation and a team to where we're doubling our service area now to where I hired a guy that is on the northeast side of town. And
Wow.
so that's like a
Let's go, man.
yeah, so
So,
we put it's kind of like a little bit of a blast from the past. We put out a Facebook
yeah.
post and said, "Hey, someone's open for business over here."
Yeah.
Because for 10 years we've said no
Yeah.
to like, we're sorry you're out of our service area, so we can do it well here.
Yeah.
So we're opening up Summit on that side of town.
Okay. Speak real quick. This is awesome. I mean, very, very exciting. And so, what was the catalyst that said you've said no for 10 years, but now you've said yes? What moved the needle?
We knew that we just as Jen had a whole like network of people on with where we live now, we have a huge family. There was 50 people at Thanksgiving. So which yeah, so we've never utilized that group of people. And so knowing that like that really we could just do this slow build on that side of town. But I waited to do that because I didn't want to overextend us
Yeah.
as a business, to
Which
know
is
that
so
like
smart.
if you don't want to, you know, you don't want to fight past your supply lines,
Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
we
That's so good.
so I think we have enough of a logistics supply line that can support someone on that side of town. It's going to be a little dicey, but I think we can do it effectively and provide the same level of service to those people as we would here now.
Yeah.
And so
So, is that Facebook post already been sent out or is it?
yeah, so we're still I haven't got my first phone call. Yeah, but it's gonna come,
Yeah,
and
that's
then
awesome.
I'm gonna go on that service call too, by the
Yeah,
way, and
that's great.
we're gonna get a referral, and they're gonna start referring us, and there'll be just this slow little,
Love
you
that,
know.
man. That's
So
so powerful, dude. I love it. And it's another leap of faith for you 10 years in your business.
yeah,
I mean, I feel like every season of business has the investment side of saying like, "Okay, here's our best next step," but it's still a leap of faith to say, "Will this work? Will it not work?" Well,
yeah,
you gotta try it.
that's yeah, for sure, and I think that like I know a lot of times people will say prayers and be like, God, just give me a sign. Like, and look for this right, like this, writing in the sky for what is the next right decision to make. And sometimes you don't get that. Or
Yeah,
most
yeah,
of the time, you don't get that.
yeah,
With from trying to get some kind of direction in life. And I think opening up that there was just enough things that pointed to saying like I think that it's still scary, but it's enough for me to say yes, you get good
yeah,
stories.
yeah.
So,
It really is a good moral to live by, but with the context of what you're talking about.
yeah, right. Uh, so yeah, so there's that. To the second part of your
Yeah.
question was, where are you going and what are your goals?
Dreaming about what's next 10 years look
So
like, yeah.
I think that it's in hindsight, it's not as difficult from what I gather to if you want to start a business and support you and you are the show, right? You are the product. You are the and it all comes down to you. There are so many good businesses that are just that. And that is something to be proud of. That is a notable thing that you can do the rest of your life is you can be the product. And you can be the service guy. You can be the person that's, whatever business you're in.
Mhm.
And you can do that the rest of your life and create a good career and a good life for it. I'll make this as succinct as I can, but a good friend of mine asked me the question and I love it. And I've always thought about it, but it, that was another pivotal point is he asked me the question. He goes, Tim, are you the man in the van or are you not? And I was like, gosh. And I didn't answer him right away. Actually, and it was probably a rhetorical question,
Yeah, yeah,
but I was like, gosh, I never really thought about that. Am I the man in the van? Like,
yeah.
and your answer can't be, I want to be both.
Yeah, yeah,
really. Like there's really not a midway point. And at some point you have to say, yes, I am, or
yeah,
no, I'm not. But to be something in the middle is frustration.
yeah,
I
yeah,
think
for
it's
sure.
possible, but it's probably more frustrating than it's not.
Yeah,
And so,
yeah,
the next time we sat down and had lunch, I told him, I go, Les, I go, I'm not the man in the van,
yeah,
which told me that like I have to build something beyond myself.
yeah, yeah, it's good.
And so for me, whenever I think about the future of Summit, is I want Summit for me to say that I built something that if it's just me, like, and the business depends on me, that means I built another job. Maybe I really like that job and that's a great job. And it is a business per se, but like you kind of just created another job that, it's not the self-sustaining thing. And so that when he asked me that and I answered that in my heart, I knew that like Summit had to become something else entirely in order for me not to be the man in the van.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And in order for me to not be the man in the van, what has been this lifelong or this process of us entering into year 12 is we have to be a certain size of a business to make that actually happen. And we're getting close,
yeah.
but I actually think that we need about almost double the amount of team members that we have, which I think maybe in 3 years, maybe
Okay.
2 years, possibly. Because once you hit like you're kind of on this curve to where it implies that you have enough service techs that someone or install crews that if someone calls in sick, that you
Yeah,
can
yeah,
shift, or you have a manager that is, needs help and you need to have a layer of management.
yeah,
And
yeah,
like this, you need to have an organizational structure to where now all of a sudden is that you're not making all these decisions. But a business that size, in order to sustain those additional layers of people, that quantity of actual people in the field has to be substantial
yeah,
enough to where there's a number that you actually would, if you hit that number, it would imply if you work it out backwards that if I did it correctly, then like it would imply that those layers of management was there in order to do it.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
so in my mind is like I won't quit this business and I won't get out of it until maybe I never will. But I don't think when I think about the future, it's not necessarily a number, but it's for me to say that like we built a organization that is has a thriving culture that is growing regardless of my input.
yeah,
It
yeah,
may take my leadership, I can influence it in certain ways, but it is growing in spite or despite of me
yeah,
and without my day-to-day interaction. And not because I don't want to work, but when that happens and this snowball happens and this, the uh this momentum takes place, then I can say, look what we built. Because anything short of that was me somewhere in the middle, and I'm still kind of the man in the van in principle in some
yeah,
ways,
yeah, yeah,
until that happens. So that's where we're going. And
yeah,
so what that looks like, I don't entirely know if you know, cast out 5 years from
yeah,
now.
yeah.
So
Well, there's a couple things I want to bring up of things you just mentioned that I love. Number one, I love asking your current state because there's this mentality of the gap in the gain, right? So sometimes we get so focused on the gap of where we want to be, we don't sit in the gratitude of the gain of where you're at. And so, like, you obviously do that, I think, very, very well. But the
I
remarkable
don't know
thing for
about
you is, 10 years in, you are now, Summit is something that 14 full time employees rely on
yeah,
for take home pay to provide for their own families. That's a pretty powerful thing in its own right, right? So I think there's so much beauty in that. And then the other thing I wanted to point out for you is that, and you mentioned this earlier, but I love that you actually said, I want to be known for culture that's really, really good. And then for something that grows without my input. And so for you, I love that you started with culture because I think there's this like I don't know, false mentality is probably not the best way to say it, but like this thing that people are striving for to say like my business is on autopilot slash it runs without me and I don't have to lift a finger for it to operate. So it makes money while I sleep or do whatever.
right.
And then the false reality, in my opinion, is that like the people that build something to go do that are going to be miserable if they're just sitting on a beach 24/7 doing nothing because their machine is paying them for doing nothing. Right.
That's right.
But the reason I love that you started with culture is because like that is you are a people person and you are in the people business more so, in my opinion, than your skill set in the HVAC world. And so you're using the HVAC world to invest in people,
That's
which
right.
I love so much. And so the reason that you I feel like are striving for that is that you have the opportunity to invest in people that are ultimately running the business. You invest in the people run the business. And now that you're in your sweet spot again of doing that. And you've had to grow to get there, but like it's fun to see
Sure.
you dreaming about that, of what that's gonna look
Well,
like.
it's funny to say that. Like I'll kind of come to this, and I don't have it memorized, so forgive me, but like I've tried to come up with like a mission statement for years and years, and they've all been so like just awful.
Put a man on the moon.
Yeah, right. I, but like what's funny is that like you look at the stages of this business, and at first like if you would have asked me what our mission statement was in year two, I'd been like to deliver heating and air to
Yeah, yeah,
this
yeah.
area, and it's funny when you start thinking about where we are now, and you s- you get clarity of what you are not. Just
Yeah,
like all
yeah.
those jobs I had of like who I wasn't, and then who I am. And one of the things that's influenced where we're going and who we are is that like when you start looking at your business, right, and you say like one of the things that I was told that, they're like, maybe you should make your mission statement something like, to be the best heating and air company and whatever, and it's just like, it's so awful. Cause like, and like that being the end goal, like if we're the best, and then like you add like, we're, people know us and we're whatever, like, and it seems so shallow, and I think that, like, when you start thinking about business and you start thinking about, like, building something, and then you start thinking about legacy, and which,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, again, that's so far out, but, like, you know, if you're just trying to make money in the process and, like, that's the goal, and that's you're building systems and processes so that you can create this income and you're sitting on the beach and
yeah,
whatever. I like I hate that.
yeah,
That sounds so lonely to
yeah, for
me,
sure.
and what I recognized was that, the 3 components of what we're trying to our mission statement goes something to the extent of is that we're trying to build leaders first. We're providing the highest level of technical excellence and creating the highest level of a client experience that you could have.
That's good.
Right. So there's three little facets, right? But if we can build a team that emphasizes building leaders within our business, so whether it's 15 people or 30 people, but the bigger we are, the more influence that we have to influence people and their families. To me, I think that a byproduct of that is you get great service and great, and people are dedicated to you know, being professionals and all the things that a business would want.
Yeah,
But I think from a legacy of building a business is if you are marked by, you are known for when people walk into your business and your, orbit here and their time here at Summit from when they look back and say, man, the person I was before I got to this company and the person that I was when I left are two totally different people.
yeah,
And they are better for it spiritually and from a leadership perspective and from a skills perspective. And like that's who Summit is. Like that's exciting,
yeah, yeah,
right? Will it be financially beneficial? Probably, almost
yeah,
how
yeah,
could it not? But like
yeah, yeah,
if that's the goal, that's something that goes on for
yeah, yeah,
generations. And, but if we built up for private equity and sold it by, for 13 times, EBITDA or
yeah,
whatever,
yeah.
like whatever, that's boring.
No,
So
I love that, dude, so much. Because, I mean, it's just impact, right? I think, like, exactly what you just described is, like, true impact in the community that you're operating in,
yeah.
and I just love it so much. It just kinda speaks to your heart, and even you being in, full-time ministry in a season in your life, and, it's just cool to see that so much. Okay, so, as you're dreaming about what you just described over the next 10 years, make the impact that you wanna make, what do you think is the biggest bottleneck right now to get you there?
I mean, y- you can cringe or not, but I mean, I'm the biggest bottleneck, right? Of like, for me to learn to go to the next step and to be able to build our business, it's me to understand what that looks like and to become that person.
Yeah,
And it's such a cliche response of like,
it's not.
but it's cliche and it's not. And it's like I'll leave this with the inspirational thing that I've heard is that like in order to be your business to be a certain size or a certain goal or a certain culture or whatever, the person that you need to be a different person to lead that.
Yeah,
Like, and who you are fundamentally has to change in order for you to effectively lead that and create and build that and create that. And
Yeah.
so I there's all sorts of dumb little bottlenecks that we could have that they all collectively, that we could talk about that I'd love to talk about.
Yeah.
But so for me is just recognizing what those one of the guys that work here, I'm always talking about what are the holes in the boat. There's
Yeah.
holes in the boat,
Yeah.
and us identifying what are the biggest holes in the boat. And we're getting at some point, you need some tools to figure out and some metrics and some KPIs and
Yeah.
whatever
Yeah.
to find the biggest holes in the boat in a lot of ways. And so it's funny, like we keep the more information that we get and getting to answer that question of the bottlenecks. It's funny is that you need to have just to have a understanding of like where those holes are is half the battle
Yeah.
of the bottlenecks. Is just figuring out where you're leaking and
Yes.
sinking.
So we can have a whole discussion on that. We got to wrap up.
Yeah.
Maybe there's part two to this because I would love to dive into that because I know you've been working on that a lot this year of just
That's
like
right.
figuring out how to track what a healthy business and what a not healthy business is to expose the bottlenecks.
That's right.
Because I think there's so much power in that itself. But I love your answer there because in great leaders fashion, the bottleneck always points back to them.
Yeah.
Because to your point, every time a business has to get to the next level, the leader has to get to the next level. And I love that answer. It's just that's always the answer because we have to grow for the business to grow because it's always going to hit the ceiling that we're hitting, whoever's leading that company. So I think there's power in that. Okay, so if people want to hear more about Summit, find you, use you in the
If you
now Northwest and Northeast.
Yeah, if you live in North Atlanta, you can Google us at Summit Heating and Air with our 5-star reviews.
Let's go.
You can find us on Facebook. I mean, I don't know, just Google Summit Heating and Air, Marietta, Georgia, or even Georgia, and like we probably would hit the top of that Google search, and then you can reach us out that way.
I love it.
So
Tim, it's been a pleasure, man. Thanks for letting us come into the office.
yeah,
It's been fantastic.
well, this is fun, right?
The scoreboard and the things you've been working on.
This is cathartic for me. Like I'm like, oh, I feel like I'm gonna take a nap after this.
Well, thanks so much, Tim. I love you. It's fun.
Love you too, buddy.